Hey everyone, thanks for joining me in session 172 of the Behavioral Observations podcast. I am so thrilled to share with you this story. It's an amazing and inspirational story, and that is the conversation I had with my guest, Mandy Mason of Fit Learning Australia. Her road to discovering behavior analysis is quite different than most guests we have here. When her daughter was diagnosed with autism, she literally traveled the globe to find out how best to help her. I don't want to spoil the story too much in the introduction here, but I will say that her search for an effective treatment not only changed Mandy's daughter's life, but the lives of countless others. And that's because Mandy has gone on to serve many other learners of diverse needs in her role as a founder and CEO of Fit Learning Australia and beyond. Her talents do extend beyond the world of ABA and precision teaching. She's a tireless autism advocate in Australia. She's a motivational speaker. She is the host of the ABA and PT podcast, which you can find on just about all podcast platforms. And oh yeah, in her spare time, she's also a world champion sprinter. No biggie, right? So in this episode, we certainly talk about how Mandy discovered ABA, what led her to adopting a precision teaching approach to her daughter's programming, how she connected with longtime friend of show, Dr. Kim Behrens, how she started Fit Learning Australia. And then we talk a lot about balancing work and life and how she managed to accomplish so much. So there's some interesting kind of productivity or life choice type of, discussion towards the end of the show. As with all my guests, she finishes with some really important advice for the newly minted BCBA as well. For Patreon subscribers, we also spend another 20 minutes of bonus content talking about how she got into sprinting, her athletic career more generally, how she manages athletes, and other fitness-related topics. This show is brought to you by HRIC Recruiting. So if you are looking for a job, Barb Voss has been placing BCBAs in permanent positions throughout the U.S. for about a decade. And when you work with HRIC, you work directly with Barb. There's no middleman to deal with or anything like that. So you get highly personalized, very knowledgeable service. So if you want to learn more about that, go to hricolorado.com to schedule a confidential chat right away. We're also brought to you by Behavior University, and their mission is to provide university-quality professional development for the busy behavior analyst. So find out more about what they can do for you from a CEU perspective, or if you need folks to have RBT trainings or whatever, just go to behavioruniversity.com/observations to learn more. And last but not least, we're also brought to you by the Professional Crisis Management Association, or PCMA for short. And later on, we will hear about how PCMA helps agencies support individuals who exhibit dangerous behaviors. But in the meantime, for more information on them, go to pcma.com. That will do it for opening comments. So without any further delay, let's get to this truly inspiring conversation with Mandy Mason.
Welcome to the Behavioral Observations podcast, stimulating talk for today's behavior analysts. Now, here's your host, Matt Sikoria.
Okay, Mandy Mason, welcome to the Behavioral Observations podcast. How are you doing today?
Oh, Matt, this is such an honor. You can't imagine. I've been listening to your podcast for a long time. And when you reached out and said, would you join me? I just can't even tell you how pleased I am to be here.
Well, it's definitely mutual. A lot of mutual friends of ours have suggested that we chat. And I had a chance to talk with them before our interview, learned a lot of really neat things about you. And boy, am I looking forward to this conversation. So thanks again for joining me. I hope I don't
embarrass those people.
Oh, no, you're going to be great. This is good. No,
Thank you.
Not in the lead, not at all.
Not at all.
So I want to start with kind of where you got into ABA. And I know your story is a little bit different than perhaps the average listener to the show. And I'm willing to bet that your involvement in ABA began with, trying to support your daughter and whatnot. So I'd love for you to take some time and maybe talk to us a little bit about the pre-ABA Mandy, what was going on before then, and what led you to its discovery, and then we can kind of take it from there.
Yeah, I think I can still claim credit to be the only, I want to say, tax behaviorist in the world. I think that was what I used to call myself, because I came to this field with a master's in international tax law. And you're right, I came to this field because of my daughter. I didn't know anything about behavior analysis before that. Before that, I was living the high life of being a chartered accountant and working in a technology company and working on large projects. And yeah, I worked for some big corporate names in Australia, some of who went under in the 80s. But anyway, that was my career until my second daughter, I'll call her Juju, was born. And yeah, from just day one, she presented with very different behavior. And it was very early on when I started to question what was occurring. My first daughter is it fair to say she was an advanced kid? I remember my mum saying, oh, she's a genius at a very early age. And I'm like, Mum, all grandmas say that, But, it turned out she was kind of reading by the age of 1 and she was very bright. And then along came Juju, and that really changed the trajectory of my life. It was hard, having a kid, as everyone knows, is kind of hard. But I mean, she just took things to a whole new level. And it took me to places that, a lot of places, including knocking on a lot of doctors' doors. And it was really probably the 12th or 13th visit to a specialist. And what I remember most is walking in and him saying, why are you here today? And I said, oh, I'm just very worried about my daughter. And he said, what is her name? And I told her. And when he said her name, and this may not surprise people that work with kids on the spectrum, she smashed her head into the wall. And, obviously after attending to her, he said to me, what are you worried about? And I said, I'm worried my daughter is regressing with autism. And by the end of that appointment, he said, I share your concerns. And we got a referral to a pediatrician, which, as takes some time, but still by 22 months, we went to that appointment. We left, and I think anyone that has ever been through that process never forgets that appointment, the day that, at least in Australia, you go to a pediatrician and they say, it looks like your child is going to meet criteria for a diagnosis of autism, and bye, good luck with that. At least back then, that's what it was like. And so you leave the office. I remember it was raining and a grey day, and I thought there was no hope and life was over. It was already very difficult. She didn't sleep much. She stopped eating and she was losing weight, and, classic behavior of head banging and knee jumping and pinching and but anyway, that was the hard part, I guess, because I had been a professional and I was used to managing big projects. She became my next big project once I got over the grief. And I just read everything I could, and I rang anybody that I could. And I didn't know anything about autism, like nothing. I didn't have any friends that had a kid with autism. I probably scarily only knew, Rain Man as any relation to autism. And so it was all new to me.
So this is about, would you say 18 years ago, 20 years ago or so? Is that
She's
about
17.
the time? Okay. All right.
She's 17 and she was 22 months when we were told. So it's 15 years ago. And I rang anyone that I knew. And I did know someone that was studying psychology, and I eventually got onto a guy who had been employed by, and not many people in the states that I've spoken to knew this, but Lovas did a replication in my state. I'm in Western Australia, and he did a replication in 1993 of the UCLA project, and it was called the Murdoch Early Intervention Project. And so there were quite a few students that studied under Dr. Bern Brower and David Leach at Murdoch. So 93 though. So by the time Juju was diagnosed in 2006, those people had kind of dissipated. And but anyway, I did manage to find one person who was working for the Red Cross, and I rang him on a Friday. And I was, that person that was like not going to take no. It's always been, I've been like that in all areas of my life. No was just like, an SD for finding your way to yes. And yeah, I said, when can you come? And he said, well, I could come Monday. And I went, well, like, what are you doing this afternoon? And I think I negotiated with him to come the next day. And he came on Saturday. And, she was the screaming, drop to the floor, head banging kind of kid. And so he had done a lot of early intervention. And I said, I want you to teach me everything you know. And yeah, he took that on for me, which is a really huge undertaking because he already had a job working with kids with developmental disabilities, like in a respite home. And we just spent a lot of time together. He was a really knowledgeable guy and he knew a lot of stuff. And we spent about 2 years together. And I did a lot of the work myself in the early days. I read Let Me Hear Your Voice. I just immersed myself in it. And in the precision teaching world, we call them LOs, learning opportunities. I made heaps and heaps and heaps of LOs. And, Gigi was the best teacher you could ever imagine because she will let you know when things weren't going well.
I bet. So you mentioned something real quick. I want to just come back to, you mentioned in passing, but I think it's worth perhaps revisiting. You said once you got over the grief, this might be difficult to talk about. We can kind of maybe skip to a different topic if you want to, but there's probably people listening to this who are encountering this scenario for the first time. Certainly most people who listen to the show are behavior analysts, but as you've probably come to learn, I'm sure there are a lot of behavior analysts who go into behavior analysts first and then have a kid on the spectrum. I've met a handful of folks.
Amazing, right?
Yeah. So for those who might be encountering that right now, can you talk a little bit about learning about the diagnosis and maybe what you might have learned about how to, and I don't know if that's, I was going to use the word come to grips. I don't know if anyone does, but if you could just kind of share your experiences and anything that you might think would be helpful for others who are navigating that particular point in time about learning about, their own child's diagnosis of autism.
Yeah, it's a very good question. Because I work with a lot of parents now, and I get a lot of calls as well because, I've done a lot of stuff, I guess, in lots of different ways, including, federal court cases for my own daughter's rights to ABA, etc. So I get a lot of calls, and, because I'm so positive now and so excited about the work and how much learning I do every day, sometimes I forget what that feels like, the impact of hearing something that you think is lifelong and you have preconceptions about what that is and what that means. And sometimes, I'll be talking about all the possibilities and what we can do and how much hope there is and what science has given us. And, while there's difficulty, you're going to get more joy from, and then I forget and I look up and there are these parents sobbing and shaking, and I have to stop. I'm always practicing getting better at listening. It's always one of my goals. And I have to stop and feel the impact of what that's like. Because, of course, when you lose a child, I can't imagine what that's like. But when you have a child that is really struggling to communicate and often, as parents are sleep deprived, financially impacted, life really, as you knew it, is either in the process of stopping or it has stopped. I'd cut off contact with all my friends. I didn't want them to see what I was going through. I didn't know how to handle her behavior. My other daughter was in crisis. And I think that's one of the things, Matt, that I would really like to share, because I feel like that's been one of my biggest learnings, and that is the impact on the siblings. And they all handle it differently, but maybe it's spoken about more in the States. It's not really something that's recognised here in a big way. But, sometimes when you have kids that have dangerous behaviors, you have to be attached to them and they're not sleeping. You're literally attached to that kid 24/7. And it's only just recently that my older daughter turned 21. And I had written letters to her every year for a number of years to be opened on her 21st birthday. And, she was able to open up and share with me what that was like to have your mother taken away from you, and hear the screaming and the tantrums and see the trauma. My husband and I separated, so she was observing that occurring. It's, for the siblings really hard. And so I think for those that are going through it, I didn't do this, even though people told me to do it, reaching out and asking for help and surrounding yourself in a community and not being alone. I failed at that. I did the opposite. I isolated myself. I immersed myself in therapy, reading, materials making, data keeping, and there were people that probably wanted to help, but I didn't want to let them in and see what was occurring. So I try and help parents reach out and let people in, because one of the big mistakes is to have no support and no one that can help. And if you're the only one doing the learning around how to interact with this kid, it's very lonely. So, whatever it is, next door neighbors or aunties or uncles or cousins that say, look, let me come and cook a meal, letting people observe what you're going through, even though that can be really challenging. I feel like it's a really good long-term goal. And also having people to share success with too, and go, wow, look what, they just did. I just noticed they turned to you, or whatever it is, like having people that can reinforce your work and acknowledge your commitment. So, yeah, I'm not sure if that answered your question, but
that was great. Yeah, very helpful. I'm sure for a lot of folks listening to this right now who are going through that, or for us practitioners to be more sensitive as we interact with families about, being more in tune with what they're likely going through, the sleep deprivation, the relationship strain, the siblings. That's it's just really good point to make. So thanks for taking a moment to share those thoughts. Are you looking for a new job, but you're overwhelmed with all the emails that you're getting from various ABA agencies? What if there was someone who was in your corner and could help you find the perfect job placement? Well, that person exists. Barbara Voss has been working as a recruiter for over 30 years, and her company, HRIC, specializes in placing BCBAs in permanent full-time positions throughout the United States. Barbara has been placing BCBAs since 2011, so she knows our business, and she offers personalized service to any BCBA looking for a new position. She also helps companies looking to hire BCBAs too. Here are just some of the things Barbara can help you with. She can provide information about salary ranges in different markets across the country. She can help you write your resume. She can coordinate and prepare you for the interview process, and even help negotiate the right salary for you. And best of all, there are no charges to any candidate for all of these services. When you're ready to make a change and want to work with someone who will listen to you and understand what you need in a new position, contact Barbara at HRIC. To schedule a confidential discussion, head over to hricolorado.com. Again, that's hricolorado.com, and hit the contact button to connect with Barbara. You won't be disappointed.
I guess the only other thing I want to say, because I'm an athlete and I have been coached by some pretty amazing coaches. And one of the things they will often say in athletics is you have to enjoy the process. Like if you've just got your mind, or your focus, I should say, on the end goal, like I want my kid to talk, or I want my kid to go to school or have a friend, or you lose some really incredible learning opportunities if you're not present in the moment to what's occurring. And this is true in training. Athletes that are really successful athletes learn to turn up and enjoy every training session. And it's really hard what you're going through, but whatever you want to call upon, you have some awesome podcasts on acceptance and commitment therapy and other processes to be present in the moment to what's occurring, not expect it to be fixed instantly, and be thoughtful about the fact that one day you're going to look back and go, wow, we came such a long way. And so that's very difficult when you have a kid that's screaming or you don't have good, behavioral support. But slowing down a little bit, having faith that it's going to get better, and enjoying the process as much as possible, I think is maybe some good advice as well from the athletics world.
So let's move on here. You were talking about how you started to get some ABA training for yourself to work with your daughter. Could you talk about how those early ABA experiences went? And I know it was challenging for you to seek out training in Australia to some extent. I, just through our mutual acquaintances, I know you traveled to the States and to learn more about it. And I think that's just, perhaps a testament to your commitment to finding successful strategies for your daughter. Can you talk a little bit about that, and perhaps maybe along the way describe your, rendezvous or your first encounter with precision teaching, and perhaps marrying ABA and PT, I suppose?
Yeah, I'm just going to calculate how many years that was between. Well, I lived in Indiana in 2013, 14, and moved to Indiana and got to IPTC in 2014. And Juliet was diagnosed in 2006. So, luckily I did Morningside Math, because that makes it 8 years before I found my way to the precision teaching community. And the really sad part for me, because for me, finding my way to this technology has been life-changing for so many reasons. But I was so close on so many occasions. My first supervisor had studied with Julie Vargas. He was a Canadian, actually, but based in New Zealand. One of the other psychologists I consulted, he had done his master's in fluent handwriting, and I don't know if he incorporated charts to his master's degree, but he had done his master's as somebody that did know how to chart. I went to a university lecture on precision teaching once, and somehow I was passionate about it, but didn't know where to get started. There were just so many times when I was so close. But to sort of cut 8 years short, I initially, when I was working with that psychologist that I first mentioned, I was with him for about 2 years, and I just felt like, he'd done 2 years in the Murdoch project, which was the length of that study, and they got some good outcomes. I think 4 out of 9 kids achieved outcomes similar to the UCLA project. So they got pretty good outcomes given the level of funding, which was tiny. I mean, I think it was like $50,000 or something for the whole project, incredibly small. But anyway, after 2 years, I was like, gosh, I don't know anything about joint attention. And, I just knew there were some areas. And so I got involved with another psychologist. I loved what he knew. He was a bit of an RFT geek. And he taught me some other stuff. And probably the kindest thing he ever did for me was say, you need to do your BCBA. And that was his way of saying, if we're going to work together, I was a financial person. So in our partnership, I did the financial side of things, and he was the clinical person. He was also a clinical psych. So, but he said, you know what, you should really do your BCBA. And it was a great advice. Now, that was not easy, let me tell you, because my master's was in international tax law, and I was the last group of BCBAs that were able to do that, and I really had to fight for it. But anyway, I ended up reaching out to Dr. Messick in New Zealand, and he was my first supervisor, and he was really good. He did a lot of reading, got me to do a lot of reading, and gave me a lot of support, but somehow I missed PT in that process. And he supervised me, and then I had another supervisor, and eventually I got my BCBA, and I got a very big project up and running in WA. It was, before I started FIT, it was the only centre-based ABA program in WA. And before that, it was all home-based. And it was a big program. At one point, we had 80 kids in that program, and it was amazing. Through a global financial crisis, I think we saved ourselves 3 times. And the last time when we ran out of funding, because we were a charity, I stepped out and decided to move to America. And that was a really hard thing to do, because it was like, losing a baby, I started that project and I built a team, and I eventually brought out a PhD from New York. And but I had decided to move to America and learn more, and enrolled Julia in a full-time program in Indiana. And I loved my time there. I loved America. I loved living there. I loved the Midwest. I had the best time. I was frustrated, though, because I had my BCBA by the stage. I was frustrated by probably the best way to put it was just the lack of opportunities that she had to practice the skills that they were teaching, because there was no data in that program, except when it came to self-care. And Patrick McGreevy was in that program, of course, using precision teaching. And I got exposed to it because I stayed for every hour. I'm sure they didn't want me there. You know, the parent that comes and observes every session. But I was trying to soak up as much as I could. And it was really my first exposure to direct instruction there. And they did it in groups and they let me participate. They were very kind. They let me be there every day for every single thing. And I got exposed to a lot of senior PhDs there. I had incredible experiences. But the thing that really changed everything for me was that one of the things they didn't have time to do with her was academics. And so I had done my studies through FIT and saw Kim Barron's on precision teaching. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to try this. And I bought Morningside Curricula and I started teaching math to her. And guess what? We said the student is always right. She would wake up every day and say, I want to do PT. This is not a kid with a huge language repertoire. I want to do PT. Mum, when are we doing PT? Can we go home and do PT? And I'm like, wow, the schedule of reinforcement has got to be so thick. It's what it is, She felt the success and she demanded it of me. And she just kept passing out math programs. Like we were going through the Morningside Curricula faster than I understood how to teach it. And eventually I was like, well, I have to go and learn more.
You probably already know that Behavior University creates engaging ABA content for new and experienced professionals. Whether it's RBT training or webinars for BACB CEUs, Behavior University has you covered. Behavior University is launching an interactive BACB supervisor training, an innovative approach to supervision training with interactive video to practice decision-making and tools to create a personalized portfolio to take with you when you're done. The course is designed to guide new supervisors through applying the important skills required for effective supervision to their own unique experiences. Behavior University also offers 2 tiers of RBT training. Choose the essentials for the 40-hour course or the premium to add a full kit of study materials and a full-length practice exam. In addition to these features, supervisors can now purchase access to these RBT courses so they can monitor any RBT training for course progress and quiz performance. Supervisors will also receive tools and content to support training of new staff. Users rave about Behavior University RBT training, calling it the clearest instruction, the course that made it stick, amongst other comments. BCBAs say that their staff clearly get it after taking their course. So to check out what they've built and to get podcast-specific discounts, head on over to behavioruniversity.com/observations.
But the reason I first went to IPTC, actually, sorry if I'm deviating off the story, is that one of the papers that Dr. Messick had me read was the paper called The Creative Porpoise. And this paper really hit me. It's still my dream. I think you're going to ask me this later, but it's still my dream to replicate that study with kids with autism. And so I had read that paper because when I was looking at Julia and observing her really with an untrained eye, I was like, her biggest deficit, in terms of cuteness, she's off the scales. Her biggest deficit is that she wants to do the same thing over and over and over. Why is it that my first daughter would sit down with a bunch of pots and pans and create stuff, make buildings and tell stories about it and do different things. And once she'd done that, she never wanted to do it again. And yet when I compare her to Juju, she wants to do the same thing over and over. There's no exploration. She's not getting into cupboards. My older daughter used to drive me crazy at the time. Now I love what she did. She would get into my spice cabinet and make, mixes and get into the sink and have these spice parties and, spilled toothpaste everywhere. And I realized now, that was her exploring and learning and, creativity and novelty. And Juju would just do the same thing over and over. So this paper really fascinated me, that you could take the porpoise and teach it to be creative and teach it, through differential reinforcement to do things that it had never done before. I was fascinated. So at some point when I was living in Indiana, I met someone. They said, I know Karen Pryor. I can introduce you if you want. And this is how generous people are in this field. She gave me her number and said, give me a call sometime. So I rang her and I said, Karen, I've read your study. I've followed your work. I'm a huge fan. And I had this dream of replicating the creative porpoise with kids with autism. And you know what she said? She goes, I've been waiting 36 years for this phone call.
That's hilarious.
And yeah, that was incredible. And she said, I happen to be going to Chicago next month. Why don't you come and meet me and we'll talk? She was so kind. She came and met Juju. I took Juju to the conference and had someone mind her in the hotel room. Anyway, that was the change of everything for me, because I was frustrated by traditional behavior analysis and the lack of, I guess, data in this program specifically, and why Juju was so motivated to do precision teaching, but not that motivated to do other tasks. I didn't see a lot of improvement, although there was a lot of programming. And I was just seeking answers, I guess. But what happened is I went early to the workshops, because in IPTC they have workshops early on in the conference to do an advanced precision teaching session with Rick Cabina. And I came out at lunchtime and I sat next to Kendra Newsom from FIT. And she said, why are you here? And I said, I'm lost. I have been on this journey with my daughter for 8 years, I guess it was by then, or 9 years. And my daughter has rote and rigid language, and I'm just stuck. I've knocked on thousands of doors and I'm just keeping knocking until I find something that's really effective for her. And I feel like I need to learn more about precision teaching. And she said, you need to talk to Kimberly Behrens. And I have this, recollection of walking through the office, out of Lost in Space. I don't even remember the name of that robot. And he's like,
oh, yeah.
His arms are flapping up and down. This is my memory of me going through the audience going, I need Kimberly Behrens. Where's Kimberly Behrens? I felt like it was my last hope, because you can imagine I had done a lot of stuff, started my own program. I lost so much money in that first program. I put all of my own savings into it. When I left that, I had to put my other daughter in boarding school and move to America. And you know what it costs for a non-resident to access intensive, 40 hours a week of ABA? I spent all of my inheritance. And here I am in the middle of Chicago in winter on my own with Juliet and a carer. I felt like it was my last chance, to make profound changes in her. So there I was, and this is one of the most impactful moments of my life. I found her. She'd just come off the stage, and I said, Dr. Behrens, I've been on a journey with my daughter. I'm stuck. My daughter has rigid language. I don't know what to do. And I, articulated to her where I was at, and she stopped and she looked at me and she said, I know your journey and I want to go on it with you. And, she's the busiest person on the planet, as you know.
Well, actually, she says you're the busiest person on the planet. So I don't know, we might have to get some clarification on that from an independent body.
Well, she's also the boldest, bravest, funniest woman that I've ever had the privilege to meet. And, in terms of impactful things, she mentions me in her book, which is just startling to me. And she also said to me, because I recorded a podcast with her just recently, that, I was one of her greatest achievements. And I reflected on why that was. But anyway, she gave me her time and her heart and her soul. And, I'm getting emotional because she really did something. She went out of her comfort zone at a time that she was just about ready to look at, giving some time to somebody to replicate what she had achieved. But she chose someone who, while I had a BCBA, I did not have many of the foundations or underpinnings that other people she could have chosen. I had a basic understanding of behavior analysis, and but she chose me, and I got so lucky. because I was invited into into her family and into the FIT family, and I found my way to precision teaching, and that was 2014. And she and I spent so many hours late at night learning and counselling and teaching me the FIT method and finding the way to the precision teaching community. And she's the most generous person. She's never said to me, I don't want you to take consult from anybody else, or don't ask questions outside of the FIT method. She's always encouraged me to reach out and learn more. And whenever I've said, I want to try this or I want to incorporate this, she's like, you go for it. And she's advocated for me to do that. So yeah, I can't say enough good things about that incredible woman. And that's how I found my way to IPTC and precision teaching. And
So for those who might not be familiar with precision teaching, could you describe perhaps some of the procedural differences between like your pre-PT programming for your daughter and what some of the changes were after you implemented some of these things? So there might be some listeners who are like, yeah, this sounds really cool. Yeah. I don't have a lot of exposure to precision teaching. So what might be some of those features or critical distinctions that you would describe this approach with?
That's a really great question, Matt, because this is what happened. When I moved to America, I had a group of parents that I was supervising, 3 in particular. So I was a BCBA by that time, and I had recruited a few clients, initially just doing parent training with them and then helping them deliver service to their kids. And so we were doing a traditional VB-MAT program, and I had recruited some therapists to do the work while I was gone. And so all of a sudden I moved to America, and then I got to see Kim in New York. And the day I went to see her, so she assessed Juju. She spent a whole day. I remember very well. It was the 19th of January, 2015, because it was Martin Luther King Day, and my daughter has she has a savant memory for dates and times and places. And so she remembers every single minute that she was there. And anyway, it was like 8:00 at night. She goes, come back, I'll present my report to you. I'll recommend, what we should do together and how we're going to do this. And I'd already decided from spending a day at FIT with her team that I wanted to do that for the rest of my life. But I never thought that she would consider, letting me do it. And I was like, at the end of the report, I sort of was like, I really want to do this. Like, she was like, great, let's do it. Like, I can supervise you. We have an affiliate model. Well, back then it was a little bit different. It's kind of one of the early adopters to their model. It's grown and become even more awesome in that time. But so I went back to New York at least 2 or 3 times to have intensive enrollments and be trained in precision teaching. So you're asking me what the difference was. So the first thing she did for me, which I think was really awesome, was she said, let's just teach you to chart, although I kind of knew that anyway, and just do what you're doing, but chart it. And that would be the answer to your question, is just do what you're doing, but put it on a standard acceleration chart, because whatever you're already doing, you can chart it. And you can chart it in the moment as you deliver. As you deliver the therapy, you can count corrects and errors and time delivered in instructing that program, and you can put it on a chart. And I promise you that will change the way you interact or develop a program from that day forward. Because as soon as you put discrete trial instruction on a chart, it looks very different. And I'm not going to go through what that looks like, because you've had awesome people that can describe that much better than me, and Rick Cabina and others. But just chart it, and it will tell you something about your learner. And so that's what I did.
If I may, so were you charting like, the traditional kind of discrete trial model of X number of trials? Yes. In other words, was it trials and % correct? And were you trying to, in other words, I guess what I'm looking for is the comparison and contrasting of, traditional trial-based methods and % correct versus some sort of free operant preparation or free operant, teaching dynamic, if you will. So were you charting kind of the former onto the chart? In other words, it sounds like you made kind of like a baby step towards a full implementation. So
I did. I didn't want to change anything, because you can imagine, that's why I told you all that that rambling, but I had to go back to the parents and go, guess what? And Kim did a beautiful job of recording a video for me to describe my discovery and what I'd found. And so it didn't sound completely crazy, but I was like, I found my way to this standard acceleration chart, and I want to chart the data that I'm taking on your kid. I'm not going to change anything right now, and just see what it looks like on a chart. And so literally, let's just say you're doing a receptive ID goal. You just set a timer and record corrects and errors and chart corrects and errors over that timing floor on a chart. And, the thing about that is, if I do this for my team when I'm first training them, I do some rapid automatic naming, say of colors or, any goal, and I show them 3 correct responses in a minute and 50 correct responses in a minute. And I put that on a stretch to fill graph, and it looks exactly the same. You put on a chart, there's no comparison.
And just to be butt in here for a second, the stretch to fill graph, You're talking about like your standard chart, the line graph that you would make in Excel or
correct
Google Sheets or what have you, an equal interval graph, if you will.
That's right. 100%. Yeah. On a chart, no matter how many opportunities the kid had to respond, looks the same, whether it's 1 out of 1 or, 50 out of 50 correct. It looks the same, but on a chart, it looks very different. And so, this is what I found in my early daughters program when I was at the center in Indiana was some days she would get, let's just say they were practicing a grading goal, and some days she would get 5 opportunities to use that grading. Other days she would get 20. Some days they would all be prompted. Other days they wouldn't. But that goal never moved in 9 months of being at that clinic, because their criteria for mastery was 80% correct, 2 sessions in a row, and a 3rd session with a novel therapist or some criteria like that, which has no evidence to support that type of mastery criteria. So those goals just never moved on. And you know what? They never put it on a chart either. They never put it on a graph either. But if they had, it would have told them something, even on a percent correct graph, because there would have been a lot of ups and downs. But you put that on a chart, you're going to be changing something pretty quick. It's going to look very ugly on a chart. So that's all I did. I just took if you want to talk about what the curriculum was, it was a basic VB MAP curriculum. So, tax, a lot of tacting, and it was all discrete trial. I wasn't doing any free operant stuff back then, any fluency-based work. And I just put it on a chart. And then what I did is, obviously being supervised by Kim, she was like, let's see how many opportunities they are having with each of these goals in an hour. And then we're going to put a phase change line on your charts, and we're going to move some of those programs along and see what happens. And she's done some very good work on looking how many trials you get done in a discrete trial program per hour versus, a precision teaching type program incorporating fluency. And it's just incomparable. You can't, when you have kids responding at, say, 50 responses per minute for colors, you can get a lot of behavior in a minute when you're doing fluency-based instruction. And so the performance was so profoundly different. The first week I did it, the parents noticed a profound change in their kids, and they were my biggest advocates. They were like, we love this. Our kids are happier. They're running into session. The whole process was just enjoyable. I learned to chart as we went. And so that was the first step. It's just looking at, okay, how many opportunities can we deliver of these programs in a 2-hour session with discrete trial? Now let's look at moving to some free operant work with these kids and see what happens and see the learning picture on the chart. And that's what I would encourage anyone to do.
How many times has this happened to you? There's a crisis where you're consulting and the individual is damaging people and the environment, and you ask, what's your policy for going hands-on here? And one staff member says, well, I don't lay a hand on him until he's a danger to self or others. Another staff member says, you do what? I only go hands-on when he puts hands on me. You then ask, well, when do you think he's actually going to be a danger to self or others? And they both say, probably pretty soon. Just then an administrator shows up and says, why hasn't this room been cleared? I don't want anyone restraining anybody. Are you tired of subjective criteria that create inconsistent environments for your clients and students? Well, this is just one area where PCMA accomplishes what others don't even realize they're lacking, which is a clear behavioral criteria for the appropriate use of restraint, including examples and non-examples. This is why the average PCMA organization reports a 60% reduction in the use of crisis intervention procedures and crisis-related injuries. Turns out it does matter if your system is based on the science of applied behavior analysis. Go to PCMA.com to see why it's in the best interest of your organization to switch to a behavioral crisis intervention system.
One thing I'm curious about is you mentioned a couple of times how implementing these new strategies resulted in the process being more reinforcing for the client, or whether it was your daughter or other individuals you were working with. What makes this way of teaching more reinforcing than, say, the so-called traditional approach? And of course, I'm using air quotes to talk about that because there's many ways in which these things are done. But just for sake of conversation here, what makes the PT approach more inherently reinforcing than, say, other ways of teaching individuals these, whether it's verbal operants or academic skills or what have you?
Well, I think I'm being supervised right now by Kendra on some things. And so, we're really looking at analogy a lot. And I just wonder if you've ever had an experience. Do you play a sport?
No, I'm not. Anything I've ever done was been kind of individual. So I like to I like to ride bikes. I like to ski and stuff like that. But team sports, it's never. I don't have a big background in that.
No, this is an individual sport. I can relate to cycling because I've done a lot of cycling as well. But just imagine that time where you're kind of feeling really fresh, and your legs are turning over, and you're moving fast, and it's easy and effortless, and it's quick, and you're not making, you're not getting stuck. The gears are not gripping. The wheels are spinning. You're at the right cadence, and it just feels so good. And that, when you program well for kids with autism, it is so easy and so effortless for them. And it's fast. There's no gaps. There's no voids. There's no try again. There's no interruption. The kid is not slowed down, and it must just feel good to them. And if you've ever been fluent at something or given the opportunity to freely engage in behavior without interruption and prompting and correction, you feel how good it feels. And that's, when you watch kids that are working on mathbacks or, letter names or sounds or any rapid automatic naming program, and it's at the right level for them, where they're just going like red, green, yellow, blue, brown. And, they're so excited and their voice is light and they're happy and engaged. That's why I think they feel it. And that's what Juju felt. She was doing, to start with in Morningside Math, they're just adding ones and zeros. So it's pretty easy for her. But what you're trying to do is increase rate. And so, she was smiling and giggling and laughing when she's doing those math facts, as opposed to other programs that were really hard and really effortful for her, required a lot of prompting, textual prompts and a lot of not hands on her, but directing. But when you're engaging freely in something and it feels so good, that's what these learners come in contact with. And, Og Lindsley says it better than me. Search out some of his videos online. He describes things so beautifully. I just recently found my way to some of his videos on YouTube, and just really encourage people he's so descriptive in how a student feels when they're engaging in behavior like that. They don't get stopped, slowed down, corrected. Errors unfold, but, they on a chart, you'll make sure that doesn't occur for too long. And I think that's just what I see in our students. And when I see students straining or pausing or stuttering or, getting stuck, I know there's something wrong with the instruction, and the chart will tell you that too.
Okay, that's a very helpful answer. So I'm hoping people who are listening out there in listener land, if they have students who are struggling and have some flexibility to try some new things in their program, that might be one small thing to consider. Obviously, get supervision. In other words, don't freestyle too much, but certainly consider something like that if you've got someone stuck.
It's a really good point that you're making, though, because I got stuck on a number of occasions. And in particular, I went to see a lecturer, and she's Australian. She did her PhD in precision teaching. I don't see any other evidence of precision teaching in Australia since her. And she was a really awesome lecturer, but I missed her message because it seemed really hard. And it's not her fault. It's where I was at in my journey. And I really got stopped. And I just wish that I'd gone up and said, tell me more. Tell me how you do that. What does that look like? How do you actually, start a timer? Where do you put the dots? Like, where do I get chart paper from? Like, I just wish that somebody had asked me. I wish I had been pushed to ask more questions and not feel embarrassed that I might not know the answers, because the really awesome thing that I found about precision teachers is that they want to share their knowledge, and they don't mind that you get it wrong and you might put things in the wrong place on the chart, but the fact that you are just trying, you'll find people in the precision teaching community will want to help you. And if anybody wants to reach out to me and I can direct them to people or just help them at all, I would just be honoured to do that in any way, shape or form. I know I've spoken to Beth and Mayor in the UK. She's a precision teacher and an SLP. She's offered the same at any time, anywhere, to help people learn to chart. And of course, there's a lot of awesome stuff going on in the PT world where people are starting to share their knowledge on YouTube and all sorts of things underway. So much more profoundly gifted than me. But yeah, it seemed hard and I got stopped, but I would just encourage anybody not to get stopped. It's really worth pushing. And
I would concur that the people in the PT community are incredibly generous with their time and incredibly welcoming in terms of helping people get interested in it and solve problems and basically use the chart and use the methods that surround the chart more. So definitely want to echo that. You mentioned something real quick, and I want to make sure we have a moment to talk about it too. You said there are people in the PT world starting to disseminate in various ways. So this is probably a good time to bring up your podcast. So I'd love you to talk a little bit about that. And I know your podcast is kind of going through an iteration right now. So what is the podcast name? Where can people find it? And what sorts of things are you planning to discuss?
Yeah, I'm sometimes a bit surprised by my own bravery, but I have been backed by an incredible guy that we both know, a friend, Bob Worsham, and he reached out to me and questioned me on a few things in the podcast that was called the ABA and OT podcast, where we had a goal of collaborating, bringing behavioral analysts and OTs together, which I think was it was a really fun venture to go on. And he pulled me up on a few things. And when we decided to stop doing the ABA and OT podcast, he said, why don't you keep going, but keep going with the chart, because every single episode always comes back to the chart anyway. And so I guess what I love, and of course this is true of any field, but there's some really extraordinary journeys in the PT world that aren't easy to find. Of course, there is fluency.org is a fantastic place to get the history of PT, and there's a Standard Acceleration Society. There's lots of good places. But in terms of hearing people talk about their journey, there's not a lot. And I think that would have really helped me. And so my goal was to ask people boldly if they would talk to me about how they found their way to PT, what their experience was, talking about their time with Og Lindsley, talking about how they learnt to chart, what they learnt to chart, and their experiences. And so far, people have just agreed to do it. And so, yeah, it's really a place to hear about people's journey to precision teaching, in hope that more people can find their way to, the experiences that I've had through that community and through using the Standard Acceleration Chart. That's my pledge, is to honour the work that, giants in this field have contributed. And I guess, too, impacted by Kimberly Behrens and her journey and what she's doing with the world of mainstream education, and just ensuring that people hear the stories more and they don't get lost.
I see. So it's the ABA and PT podcast. Is that the title?
Yeah, that's right. I didn't even answer your question there. So you can find us on Facebook. When I say us, I mean me. And yeah, we are on Spotify and Podbean. And we've just launched our first episode with Abigail Corkin. And, in terms of extraordinary experiences, I think talking to her is just at the top of the heap. And I think I promised to take only an hour of her time, and I think we ended up spending 6 hours together. So, it was just the most extraordinary experience for me, and I'm still, pinching myself that happened. The second episode is coming out in another week or so. So yeah, that's the start. And then Kimberly Behrens is going to talk in our third episode, and then I'm going to be talking to anybody that can talk to me about their journey through positional teaching.
Awesome. And we'll have all the links to your show in the show notes for this particular episode. So if anyone wants to find it, they can go to behavioralobservations.com and look for this particular episode, and we will make sure people know where to go to get it. Thank you. This question's prompted by a couple of people. So you've gone through this. I want to find a different word for journey, but I think I'm struggling right now. Sure. So you've gone through this journey, right? And you, from trying to find interventions to help your daughter, you from there you've started your own fit learning lab, which, from what I understand, is one of the most successful labs that in the fit learning universe. And I guess the question I have, as do some of our mutual acquaintances, is what's next? I know Kim wants you to write a book. And I know Bob is curious where this journey is going to take you next. But I wonder if you have some thoughts about where you want to go with your career moving forward.
I guess, yeah, that's a really good question. I definitely want to do a PhD. And, I told you I have that dream of replicating creative corpus with kids with autism because I'm just fascinated by novelty and creativity from a behavioural perspective. I would like to do that. I haven't reached out to Karen yet and asked her for advice, but that's on my to-do list. But I guess you say journey because, yeah, I feel like that's what I'm on, is that I feel I have an affinity with parents and I seem to have the ability to be able to motivate them and give them hope and be courageous and bold about what they ask for in terms of funding. And I have run a big court case for my daughter's rights to have ABA delivered in a school context, which was a really big victory in Australia. And my next really big pursuit is to advocate for kids, beyond early intervention to still access ABA, using ABA to teach skills, because we have a funding model here called the NDIS. It's an insurance scheme. And, the government doesn't really understand that learning doesn't stop. Kids can continue to make great progress beyond traditional ages of early intervention, and everybody listening to that, of course, knows that. But our government model sort of is designed for kids to stop getting funding at around the age of 7, what they would call sort of early intervention. And my fight is to demonstrate that my daughter has made extraordinary progress post, even still into advanced language goals of learning perspective taking and analogy and extraordinary things that fit learning know how to teach. And I see the future for her is that she'll, despite the fact that she started at a very low base, I see that there is hope for her to live partly independently, and she already has a job, and she's the most popular employee in that shop, and she loves it. And her progress, not on my judgment, but based on the standard acceleration chart, is still phenomenal. She still learns at a rate, even though her starting point is a lot lower, like a neurotypical kid. That's what precision teaching does if you do it well. And I want to demonstrate that our science is applicable to any population at any age, and that she should have the rights to choose to spend her funding on effective evidence-based methodologies. And so that's, I guess, my initial stand, probably a legal stand for those rights. And I think they're based in human rights for everybody to have the ability to have behavioural science applied to themselves. So that's my next big stand. I really would like to have a PhD, but I guess I want to write a book at some point with Kim's approval that talks about a parent's perspective through behaviour analysis, and I guess a message to authorities that this is an important science that can really change not just a student's life, but a community's life. When people see how effective these methods are, not just for kids with, severe challenges, but for all people, I'm just hoping that I can contribute to that journey that I'm on with Kim to show that behavioral science can change the world, and there's still a lot of hope for that to occur. And I'd like to write a book at some point if I can.
Awesome. So you want to get a PhD, write a book, advocate legally for children, continue to support your family. Yeah. So this kind of leads into my next question here, because one of the things that Kim talked about when we were chatting is about this incredible reservoir of productivity that you seem to have. And she was telling me stories about you being in, parents' homes, at late hours at night, trying to help them do X, Y, and Z. And at the same time, running a business and supporting your daughter. And, we just scratched the surface of some of your, athletic accomplishments and all the work that goes into that. So I'm wondering, I guess I have a general question about productivity. Like our society has all these messages that we should do really great. We should do our best at work at the same time. We should exercise and eat right. We should engage in self-care. Oh, and by the way, try to find time to sleep and be present with our kids and family members. It's, so there's all these kind of things pulling at us all the time. I'm wondering if there's any lessons as far as productivity or time allocation or things like that has worked for you that you could share with the audience.
Yeah, I guess, the biggest one, that's the obvious one, is do what you love for a start, do things that you love. And I love this field. I found my way to it because of my daughter, but every day is a blessing for me. And, I have some extraordinary people that consult to me. I'm a beginner in this field. I think I've learned a lot because I've just dropped hundreds of thousands of dots on charts, and I've had incredible mentors, but I'm just a baby really in this field. But I love every minute, and I'm surrounded by a team that believes in this journey that I'm on with Fit Learning. And, Fit Learning has a 30-year plan. So, every day I get up and am tracking towards the values of Fit Learning, and I feel inspired by that. So it's never, there's challenges because I feel like I can never do enough. We have a model for our intensive behavioral guys of 20 hours a week. It's never enough, So that's my challenge, is not having enough hours in the day to do more. But the other thing I was just going to say is one of the methodologies that I learned about 10 years ago, but I just, in the last 2 years, I've come back to it, is Getting Things Done by David Allen.
Okay. And I've heard of that. Yeah.
I don't know if you know about it. Wow. I just just encourage anybody to learn that system. It's quite extraordinary when you apply it in its full method. I just started to chart next actions completed, actually, and that's really helping too. But so you can incorporate taking data on your own performance in it as well. I don't think you would have any idea that you could do that. But it's a life management tool, really, a way of, breaking projects and things down into next actionable tasks. And people will have their own methods of doing that. But that really makes sure that I don't lose anything, that I capture projects and information and I can locate them easily. And my team is learning to use that system as well. So just encourage anybody. I've done a lot of different things because I used to work for a chartered accounting firm. So there were lots of different time management systems that I've done. But Getting Things Done is it's more than just a to-do list. It's about capturing everything that's floating in your head. And they say, what comes from implementing that system is a mind like water. Things flow in and flow out, but everything gets caught in a system. And so, that's partly to answer your question, loving what you do, having a really good system for capturing everything and then deciding where to spend your time. And GTT is a really good way of saying, okay, looking back on my life when it's over, I want to make sure that I spent my time in these areas, because it's really easy to waste a lot of time. I'm working with a kid at the moment, and her mum, has access to her data. And last week she spent 24 hours on TikTok. 2 whole days, and that's allowing for sleep. And I'm like, imagine, of course I didn't say this to her because, in the process of having her approach me and trust me and stuff, but imagine if she spent 2 days a week on something else other than watching videos, like what, than TikTok. So, just accounting for your own time. But, you say those things about me. I don't feel like I'm achieving a lot until when I spent time with Abigail Corcoran and look back on her life, what she did. You shouldn't be talking about the things that I'm achieving. This woman just achieved the most extraordinary things. I think have a good system, love what you do, let go of stuff that's not important to you. Think about what they call it in GTD is horizons of focus. So like you can say, looking down on your life, where do you want to spend your time, and ensure that you're allocating your time there. I have to remind myself sometimes that I'm going off track. Do I wake up early? Abigail Corcoran told me she used to wake up every day at 4 a.m. I wake up at about 4:30 a.m. So I have like 2.5 hours before my daughter gets up to get organized and do stuff and make sure I'm on track. And then I just let go of stuff that's not important to me. So like I don't cook because that takes a lot of time and I don't like it. So, I get meals in, or I get someone else to cook for me. Like I don't spend time cooking. I don't shop much. I don't have an interest in buying clothes and things like that. So I just don't do stuff that a lot of people would spend time doing. And I think that's the key, is just see if you can farm out stuff that you don't really love doing.
Awesome. Do you have any other final thoughts for, I guess that could be the advice for the newly minted BCBA, but if you have other thoughts to leave the audience with before we transition perhaps to some Patreon content, I'd love to hear it.
Well, I don't know when this is going to publish, but obviously IPTC is next week. If you want to, it changed my life going along there. If you want to get along to the International Precision Teaching Conference, I think it's 2 days and plus there's some workshops as well. That's something you can do to learn more. And I guess one of the things that Kim said in my podcast that I just really loved is just be open to something that you don't know. Like keep expecting that you can learn new stuff and get better and incorporate new things, because my second supervisor, when I explained to him that I was getting interested in precision teaching, he told me that I had lost my mind. I was joining a cult. He told parents that I was consulting with that I had, gone over to the dark side. But that didn't stop me. The student is always right. And Juliet, helped me persist through those hurdles. But open yourself to learning something. And I promise you there's a lot to learn in precision teaching. A lot of people in the precision teaching community are not behaviour analysts. They're teachers and speech therapists and, OTs and stuff. And they found their way to the chat because it's effective. And so my advice would be, don't get stuck because someone says the funky blue chart or that's a cold or anything that you've heard before. Open yourself to the possibility. And you've done an incredible job, Matt, of interviewing some profound names in this community. So they have an incredible wealth of knowledge. And, I just encourage people to reach out and get to the conference, ask questions, look up their stuff, and reach out to precision teachers who are just more than willing to share what they know.
Awesome. Mandy Mason, thanks so much. All right, so let's transition to some bonus content for Patreon subscribers. I'd like to talk a little bit about your athletic career. So it turns out that you're a world champion sprinter. Hey everybody, I want to encourage you to join the Patreon group if you want to hear the extra 20 minutes or so that we talk about Mandy's athletic career and the accomplishments that she has made as a world champion sprinter, how she got into sprinting and things like that. So you can check out how to join the Patreon over at patreon.com/behavioral observations. There's a number of other benefits available to Patreon subscribers as well, depending on what tier you sign up for. So I hope you check it out. And in the meantime, we'll see you in the next session of the Behavioral Observations Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Behavioral Observations Podcast with Matt Sikoria. You can find Matt's notes on this episode at www.behavioralobservations.com. We also invite you to stay connected with us on Facebook at facebook.com/behavioral observations and on Twitter at Behavior Podcast.